it started to notice a pattern. Every single time my long-distance, text-only boyfriend and I got into a fight, our high-minus-strong CEO would force the entire department to work overtime. It was uncanny. So sitting at my desk, I finally typed out a message to him. Every time we fight, I end up stuck at work. I think we need to break up. Yuri. Bad luck. Less than a minute after hitting send, disaster struck. Panic minus stricken. I furiously tapped out another text. I'm not even kidding. You really are a curse. The boss just announced he's cutting our salaries. Let's block each other. Goodbye. A moment later, the CEO's personal assistant, Simon, stepped out of the corner office. His eyes swept across the room, meticulously scanning our desks, before finally coming to a halt right in front of Clara. Take this pen, Simon said, his voice flat but carrying a strange weight, and follow me to the office. The silver fountain pen in Clara's hand was mine. It blended to her just yesterday, and it was a gift from my text-boyfriend. 3 minutes ago, I had officially cut ties with my virtual boyfriend. Immediately after, Simon had rushed out of the boss's office looking thoroughly rattled, had ordered us all to stand up, clear our desks and search for something. Then he took Clara and the pen away. We held our breath as Clara was led away, only letting out a collective sigh. Once the heavy glass doors clicked shut behind them, instantly the office erupted into quiet whispers. What did Clara do? Just going to get absolutely shredded. Someone get the tissues ready. It's going to be a bloodbath. The dread was entirely justified. The Harley family owned a massive sprawling empire, and Zachary Harley had originally been the high-flying CEO of the parent company. But after our branch's performance took a nosedive, they sent him down here to personally whip us into shape. Tall, impossibly handsome, highly educated and possessing the kind of tailored physique that belonged on a runway. That was our first impression of him. For about 20-4 hours, Zachary was the collective fantasy of every woman in the office. By day 2 he shattered those illusions with a brutal iron fist. No being late, no office romances, no personal phone use during work hours. And the absolute kicker, our annual revenue target was arbitrarily doubled to $1 billion. For context, we had barely scraped $500 million the year before. He was ruthless, treating performance metrics like a matter of life and death, moving through the office like a flawlessly programmed, unfeeling machine. People went into his office with 4 smiles and came out in tears. If you did well, he expected better. If you fell short, he tore you to shreds without a second thought. He was our resident Grim Reaper. Under the crushing weight of this daily anxiety, I had turned to a coping mechanism, a secret online relationship. It had started as a complete accident. My cousin had gotten a new number, and when I went to add him on WhatsApp, I missed it to digits. Surprisingly, the stranger on the other end accepted my request anyway. Assuming it was my cousin, I immediately fired off a barrage of random text. The only response I got was a single question mark. Pissed off, I snapped back. What is your problem? Wanna fight? The stranger replied with another silent. A prickle of a knee set in. I tapped on his profile picture and scrolled down. It was completely blank. No status updates. No photos, nothing. Like my cousin who posted every single detail of his mundane life. My stomach sank. Oh God. Cringing, I typed. I am so incredibly sorry. Wrong number. Can I buy you a coffee to make up for it? I sent him a quick VNMO of $5. He immediately sent back 50. Intriguing. I decided I liked him already. After a few more exchanges, I realized there was something uniquely captivating about him. Despite never having met, we fit together with an ease that felt almost predestined. We didn't share names, photos, or occupations. We were looking for a connection of the mind, a sanctuary from our real lives. Eventually, we drifted into a relationship. Even without physical presence, it was understood that we belonged to each other. It was sweet. Mostly though, he had a sensitive streak. He to get brooding like Wyatt if I took too long to reply. Or if I forgot to text him goodnight if I teased him too sharply. He to go cold, and every single time he went cold, Zachary Harley would suddenly order us to work late. It was the most bizarre, agonizing coincidence. Once or twice I could shrug it off, but every single time, my sanity couldn't handle the double whammy of a moody boyfriend and a tyrannical boss. So I broke things off in the immediate terrifying fallout. A company minus wide salary cut. Dear Lord, if keeping a secret boyfriend meant destroying my livelihood, and everyone else's, it was a curse. We were clearly cosmetically incompatible. Now poor Clara had been dragged into Zacharia's office. All because of that pen. My ex-boyfriend had insisted I keep it with me at work, treating it like some sort of talisman. It led it to Clara yesterday because her own had run dry. Dating that man was a hazard to myself and everyone around. A short while later, the heavy door swung open. Clara emerged, not crying, not trembling, but with a soft triumphant smile grazing her lips. and walked a half-meanest step behind her. Usually Simon was a carbon copy of Zachary's starch-minus shirt, unapproachable and utterly humorless. But right now, he was hovering behind Clara like a well-trained puppy. Clearing his throat, Simon announced to the room, "The pay cuts have been rescinded. No overtime tonight. And Mr. Harley is treating the entire department to dinner." Before we could process the sudden miracle, he added, "Also, Clara has been promoted to assistant project lead." He paused, letting the words hang in the air before delivering the coup de grâce. "Clara is officially Mr. Harley's girlfriend." The silence in the room was absolute. Clara had only been with the company for 6 months, while I had poured 5 years of sweat and tears into my desk, just to earn that exact same title. But who was going to complain? When a man is powerful and cold, as Zachary Harley decided to show blatant favoritism to his woman, there was no room for logic. It was less about jealousy and more about, Within seconds, the spell broke. My co-workers abandoned their keyboards and swarmed Clara, showering her with sugary praise. "Clara, oh my gosh. Are you really dating Mr.? Really? How did you do it? How did you tame the beast? Seriously, you saved our lives today. We owe you big time." Clara stood at the center of the storm, playing the part of the demure, blushing maid. Imperfectly, I had no desire to join the parade. Stepping away, I quietly checked my phone. Nothing. No texts, no desperate please. My virtual relationship was officially dead. I headed toward the break room to get a coffee, but before I could make my escape, Clara parted her sea of admirers and walked straight up to me. "Gwen," she said, her voice dripping with sweet courtesy. "Yes," I asked, keeping my tone polite. She smoothed her dark red lipstick, looking momentarily hesitant. "I wanted to ask you, that silver pin you let me yesterday, was it a gift from your boyfriend?" "Yeah," I replied simply. "My online boyfriend." Clara leaned in a fraction closer, her eyes scanning mine. "Do you know what he looks like, or his real name?" "No. That's kind of the point of the whole anonymous dating thing." I gave her a curious look. "Did the pen cause some sort of problem in there?" "Oh no. Mr. Harley didn't mind at all," she said quickly, her smile returning. "Actually, I really love the way it writes. Would you be willing to sell it to me?" I didn't care about the pen anymore, nor did I want to know what it had cost him, though the weight of the metal suggested it wasn't cheap. "Don't worry about it," I said, shrugging. "If you like it, keep it. Keeping it would only remind me of a dead relationship." "But your boyfriend gave it to you," she pressed, tilting her head. "We broke up." "Why?" I leaned in and whispered. "Bad feng shui. The universe basically told me he was a hazard to my health." Firia looked deeply pensive. "I see. Would you mind telling me a bit more about him? What was he like?" Seeing my raised eyebrow, she quickly softened her expression. "I know it's a weird question. It's just I haven't had much relationship experience. And sometimes with Mr. Harley, I find it so hard to read him. I'm trying to understand how men think." I took a sip of my coffee and offered a polite, distant smile. "You're gorgeous, Clara. I don't think you'll have any trouble figuring him out. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should get back to work." The restaurant's Zachary booked was the most expensive steakhouse in the city. It was a classic power move, really buying our goodwill. To ensure his new girlfriend had a smooth ride at the company, Clara sat closely by his side, practically dripping in newly acquired diamonds that caught the candlelight. Zachary watched her with a softened intensity that felt entirely out of character. Who would have thought? Our resident monster was actually a hopeless romantic. Under all that starch? As luck would have it, the moment dinner ended, the heavens opened up in a torrential downpour. My colleagues paired up under shared umbrellas and dispersed into the wet night. Having forgotten my own, I stood stranded under the restaurant's awning, watching the sheets of rain. "Let me give you a ride." I looked up to find Simon standing beside me, offering a rare, gentle smile as he tilted his umbrella to cover me. Mr. Harley and Clara left together. "My car is parked just over there." "Oh, thank you so much," I said, genuinely relieved. Once we were on the road, Simon glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "How long have you been with the firm, Gwen?" 5 years. "Are you seeing anyone?" "Just broke up, actually." I found the sudden curiosity strange. Simon wasn't exactly known for his warm conversational skills. "Clara was just promoted to assistant lead," Simon said, keeping his eyes on the road. "Since she's still relatively new, I was hoping you could help guide her through the ropes of this next project." "Ah, there it was." "Of course," I replied a little dryly. "She's the boss's girlfriend. I know how the game works." "Actually, Gwen, that's not what I meant at all." Simon met my gaze in the mirror. "Rachel is going on maternity leave soon. When she does, her position as project lead will be vacant. Personally, I'm hoping you'll be the one to fill it." A subtle hint, but a welcome one. Given my track record, I deserve that spot. "Thank you, Simon. I'll make sure to put my best foot forward for the new campaign. Claire and I will co-minor leads, each handling half of the workload." He took the preliminary market research and strategy, while I handled the execution and financial projections. Once compiled, the final report had to be personally presented to Zachary. Clara insisted on handling the presentation herself. Normally, presenting to Zachary was the corporate equivalent of walking the plank. We used to pass the duty around like a hot potato, but since she was the golden girl now, I was more than happy to let her take the spotlight. When she finally emerged from his office, however, her face was completely drained of color. She walked back toward our cubicles with heavy dragging steps. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. Did being the boss's girlfriend not shield her from his wrath? Clara, are you okay? I asked, rising from my chair. Gwen, I need a massive favor. Please, you have to help me, she pleaded, her eyes welling with tears, as if she were the victim of some grand tragedy. What's going on? I made a really stupid mistake on the first half of the report. I didn't realize we had to use this year's projected metrics. I just used last year's closed data. When Mr. Harley started losing his temper, I got so scared. I told him that part was yours. I stared at her utterly speechless. You did what? Clara grabbed my forearm, squeezing it tightly. He wants to see you in his office right now. Please, Gwen, just take the fall for this. One time, I'll buy you dinner. I promise. My cubicle neighbor, Zoe, nudged my foot under the desk, shooting me a warning look. But seeing Clara's frantic state and knowing the power dynamic, I let out a tired sigh and nodded fine. Oh, thank you so much, Gwen. Her tears vanished instantly. She spun on her heel, her perfectly curled hair bouncing. As she practically skipped away, Noah gave me a look of pure sympathy. She's the boss's girl, she whispered. We can't win. Good luck, Gwen. Bite hard. Bracing myself for the worst, I marched toward the lion's den. Zachary's office was decorated in stark, oppressive shades of charcoal and slate, designed to make visitors feel small. He sat behind his massive desk, radiating a cold, lethal aura. He didn't even bother to look up when the door clicked shut. Took you long enough? Are you physically incapable of walking at a normal pace? Just pretend he's yelling at Clara. I chanted silently to myself. It's fine. How long have you been with this company? Zachary asked, his voice sharp with irritation. 5 years, I stammered, hating how small I sounded. 5 years and you present this other garbage? He picked up the heavy binder and tossed. It skittered across the polished floor, stopping right at my feet. I bent down to retrieve it, and as I stood up, my eyes met his. His gaze was icy, razor minus, sharp and entirely unyielding. 5 years of experience, and you make a rookie mistake like this? Do you honestly believe you're still an asset to this department? Terrified and utterly overwhelmed, my brain short, circuited. Yes, sir. You're right. I'm an idiot. Simon slipped into the office carrying a stack of folders. He took one look at my pale face and frowned slightly. The second half of this report is acceptable, Zachary continued, relentless in his criticism. But the beginning is a complete disaster. If you don't want to do your job, Gwen, let me know. Actually, Sir, Gwen is one of our most reliable seniors. This seems unlike her, Simon interjected gently, trying to throw me a lifeline. Wasn't this a joint project with Clara? Zachary glared at his assistant, as if Simon had suddenly grown a second head. My eyes drifted to the desk, landing on the fountain pen gripped in Acria's hand. A jolt went through me. The silver fountain pen in Zachary Harley's hand caught the harsh fluorescent light of the office, casting a sharp, metallic glint across his mahogany desk. I knew that pen. I knew the weight of it, the coldness of its engraved barrel, and the smooth, effortless way the ink flowed from its nib. My online boyfriend, the man I had blocked just 20 minutes ago, had sent it to me in a velvet-lined box 3 weeks prior. Carry this, he had texted. Think of it as a piece of me keeping you safe while you work. I had laughed then, calling him an old-fashioned romantic. Now looking at the exact same pen gripped in the white-knuckled fist of our tyrannical CEO, the pieces of the puzzle crashed together with a violence that made my chest tighten. The sudden overtime whenever we argued, the company-wide salary cut the second I broke things off, the frantic desk search Simon had ordered immediately after my final text. Zachary Harley was my anonymous boyfriend. The realization was a physical blow, leaving me momentarily breathless. The man who had sent me sweet, brooding, and deeply personal poetry at 2 a.m. was the same man who at 9 a.m. had threatened to fire our entire department because a spreadsheet was formatted incorrectly. Well, Zachary's voice sliced through my panic like a scalpel. He leaned forward, his icy gaze pinning me to the floor. Are you deaf, Gwen? Or did you lose your capacity for speech along with your professional competence? Simon, standing just a step behind Zachary, gave me a subtle, warning look. He was holding a stack of folders, but his eyes were fixed on the silver pen in Zachary's hand. Simon knew, or at least Simon knew something was deeply wrong with this entire setup. I swallowed the lump of dread in my throat. I had to play this perfectly. If I blurted out the truth now, Clara would accuse me of trying to steal her boyfriend, and Zachary, in his current volatile state, would likely fire me on the spot for insubordination. I apologize, Mr. Harley. The error was mine. I will review the projections and have a corrected draft on your desk by tomorrow morning. Zachary's eyes narrowed. He looked at the binder at my feet, then slowly raised his gaze back to my face. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of something undefinable crossed his features, a fleeting shadow of familiarity, perhaps, or a subconscious reaction to the tone of my voice. But just as quickly, the mask of the unfeeling CEO slid back into place. You have until 8 a.m., he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet hum. If it is not perfect, do not bother coming to work on Monday. Dismissed. I picked up the binder, bowed my head slightly, and turned to leave. As my hand gripped the heavy brass doorknob, I heard Zachary speak to Simon behind me. Cancel my lunch with Clara, Zachary said, his tone flat, empty of the warmth one would expect when speaking of a new girlfriend. And tell her to leave the pen on my desk. I don't want her carrying it around. Yes, Mr. Harley, Simon replied. I stepped out of the office and shut the door behind me. The cool air of the hallway felt like a blessing against my burning face. I leaned against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. My myocardial ischemia was a quiet, dormant beast, but moments like this poked at it, sending dull, aching thuds through my chest. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the cold glass of my emergency medication. Breathe, told myself. Just breathe. When I returned to my cubicle, Clara was already waiting for me. She was sitting on the edge of my desk, swinging her legs, her dark red lips curved into a smug, victorious smile. So, Clara purred, checking her manicured nails. How did it go? Did he tear you to shreds? He gave me until tomorrow morning to fix the projections, I said, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. I sat down and opened my laptop, refusing to look at her. Clara let out a theatrical sigh of relief. Oh, thank goodness. You really saved my skin, Gwen. I knew I could count on you. After all, 5 years at a desk like this must make you practically immune to his temper, right? Is that why you blamed me for your mistake, Clara? I asked, finally looking up. My gaze was level, cold, and entirely focused. Because you thought I was immune? Clara's smile faltered for a microsecond before she smoothed her hair back with an airy laugh. Oh, don't be like that. We're team players here, aren't we? Besides, as Mr. Harley's girlfriend, I have to maintain a certain image. It wouldn't look good if the boss's partner was seen making rookie mistakes. Of course, I said, a dry, humorless smile touching my lips. We must protect the image. Exactly. Clara beamed, entirely missing the sarcasm. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. By the way, Simon told me Mr. Harley wants me to leave the silver pen in his office. He said he wants to keep it safe. Do you think he's planning to get me a matching set of jewelry? I saw a gorgeous Cartier bracelet on his desk calendar. I have no idea, Clara, I said, turning my eyes back to my screen. But if I were you, I'd give him the pen. You wouldn't want to upset him. Oh, absolutely, Clara said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. I'll drop it off before I head out to the mall. See you tomorrow, Gwen. Don't work too late. As she walked away, her laughter echoing down the corridor, my phone buzzed in my lap. It was a private notification from the campus forum, the old university group where several alumni from our firm still chatted. A thread had just been posted. Rumor has it the Reaper of the Harley Empire has finally been tamed. Is the new assistant project lead the future lady of the manor? I closed the app, deleted the notification, and began rewriting the entire project strategy from scratch. I didn't do it for Zachary, and I certainly didn't do it for Clara. I did it because 5 years of my life were poured into this career, and I refused to let a hypocritical CEO and a fraudulent social climber steal my future. Over the next 2 weeks, the atmosphere in the department underwent a bizarre, agonizing shift. The daily panic of overtime had temporarily ceased, but the tension in the air was thicker than ever. Zachary Harley had always been a man of few words, but lately, he seemed shrouded in a dark, brooding cloud that even Clara's constant presence couldn't disperse. From my cubicle, which sat directly opposite the glass partitions of the main executive corridor, I watched their interactions like a scientist observing a flawed experiment. Every afternoon, Clara would sashay into Zachary's office, carrying gourmet coffees or custom-ordered lunches. She would lean over his desk, laughing loudly at things he hadn't said, showing off the diamonds she had purchased with her newly acquired corporate advance. But Zachary's body language was stiff, cold, and utterly detached. When she spoke, he would look at her with a furrowed brow, as if trying to translate a foreign language. He would answer her in short, clipped monosyllables. Often, when she turned her back to look at her phone, Zachary's gaze would drop to the silver fountain pen resting on his leather desk pad. He would pick it up, twirl it between his long fingers, his face a mask of profound, aching confusion. He was looking for his virtual girlfriend, and he was finding a shallow, materialistic stranger. He's pulling away from her. Zoe, my cubicle neighbor, whispered one afternoon, leaning over the partition with a cup of tea. Have you noticed? She's been in there for 20 minutes, and he hasn't looked up from his tablet once. It's none of our business, Zoe, I said, typing away at my keyboard. Oh, come on, Gwen. It is our business when our daily survival depends on his mood, Zoe argued. Yesterday, Clara tried to baby talk him in front of the regional directors, and Zachary looked like he wanted to jump out of the window. I don't get it. If he's so head over heels for her that he promoted her overnight, why does he look like he's attending his own funeral every time she enters the room? I knew why. My anonymous boyfriend, the man behind the screen, had been a lover of philosophy, late-night debates, and quiet dark humor. We had spent hours discussing everything from Marcus Aurelius to the absurdity of modern corporate structures. He had loved my dry wit, my sharp analytical mind, and the way I challenged his brooding, cynical outlook on life. Clara, on the other hand, couldn't tell the difference between stoicism and a skincare routine. Her conversational repertoire consisted entirely of office gossip, luxury brands, and self-congratulatory remarks about her own appearance. Zachary was slowly realizing that the soulmate he had found online was in reality an empty vessel. But because she held the pen, the unique, custom-made token he had sent to his anonymous love, he was forcing himself to believe the lie. Gwen, Mr. Harley wants to see you in his office. Simon's voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up to see the assistant standing at the entrance of my cubicle. His face was unreadable, but there was a quiet, supportive nod of his head. The corrected market research? I asked, picking up my tablet. Yes. And the final budget allocation for the Q4 campaign. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my charcoal trousers, and walked toward the corner office. As I approached, the door opened and Clara walked out. Her face was flushed with anger, her lower lip trembling in a way that was clearly designed to look pathetic, though there was no one in the hallway to appreciate the performance. She glared at me as we crossed paths. Watch your step in there, Gwen, she whispered venomously. He's in a horrible mood today. Don't make things worse for the rest of us. Thanks for the warning, I replied smoothly, stepping past her. When I entered the office, the air was cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. Zachary was sitting back in his leather chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. The silver pen was resting on the desk, right next to a small, hand-painted ceramic mug that looked entirely out of place in this high-tech luxury office. My heart skipped a beat. That mug. It was a cheap, poorly glazed piece of pottery with a tiny misshapen cat painted on the side. I had made it during a pottery class 3 years ago, and had sent a photo of it to my anonymous boyfriend when he complained about his generic corporate coffee cups. I'll buy you a real one day, I had texted him. No, he had replied. I want the cat. It has character. Just like you. He had actually gone out, tracked down the specific studio, or perhaps had his assistant find a replica. No, wait. He couldn't have tracked it down unless. Sit down, Gwen, Zachary said, his voice quiet, devoid of the usual biting sarcasm. I sat in the leather chair opposite him, keeping my posture straight and my hands folded in my lap. Here are the corrected budget allocations for the Q4 campaign, Mr. Harley. I've adjusted the projected metrics to reflect this year's current market volatility as requested. I handed him the tablet. Zachary took it, but he didn't look at the screen immediately. Instead, his eyes fixed on my face. He studied me with an intensity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was a quiet, searching gaze, as if he were trying to find a hidden pattern in the lines of my expression. Simon tells me you've been with this firm for 5 years, he said, his voice smooth, almost conversational. Yes, Mr. Harley. And in those 5 years, you've never once applied for a transfer or a promotion until the recent vacancy left by Rachel's maternity leave. I believed in proving my worth through consistent performance first. I replied, keeping my tone strictly professional. I didn't want to jump ahead until I knew I could handle the responsibility. Zachary tapped his fingers against the desk. A rare trait in this office. Most people here seem to prefer shortcuts. His gaze drifted to the cheap ceramic cat mug on his desk, his expression darkening. Tell me, Gwen, do you like pottery? The question was so sudden, so incredibly specific, that my breath hitched. My fingers clenched around my notebook. He was testing the waters. He was desperate. for a connection, and he was throwing out hooks, hoping to catch the girl he had lost. But I looked at the luxury watch on his wrist, the tailored suit that cost more than my 3 months' rent, and the memory of his cold, tyrannical behavior in this very room flashed through my mind. This was the man who had cut my colleagues' salaries because he was having a bad day. This was the man who used his corporate power like a weapon. No, Mr. Harley, I said, my voice steady, flat, and entirely convincing. I find pottery to be incredibly messy and tedious. I prefer more structured hobbies. Zachary's eyes dimmed. A visible wave of disappointment washed over his face, his shoulders shifting slightly as he leaned back into his chair. I see, he murmured, his voice losing its brief spark of warmth. He looked down at the tablet I had handed him, his eyes scanning the data with rapid, practiced efficiency. The projections are correct. The logic is sound. This is the quality of work I expect from a senior lead. Thank you, Mr. Harley. You may go. I stood up and walked toward the door. Just as I reached for the handle, his voice stopped me once more. Gwen. I turned. Yes, Mr. Harley. Zachary was holding the silver fountain pen, his thumb running over the engraved initials near the cap. Initials I had never noticed before because I had given the pen to Clara so quickly. Do you know why people block each other? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, looking not at me but at the pen. Why someone would simply disappear, without a single word of explanation, over a minor misunderstanding. The vulnerability in his voice was staggering. For a moment he wasn't Zachary Harley, the terrifying CEO of a billion-dollar empire. He was just a lonely, broken-hearted man asking a question to the dark. My chest ached, a familiar tightness creeping into my lungs. But I held my ground. Perhaps, Mr. Harley, I said softly, it wasn't a minor misunderstanding. Perhaps the other person realized that the distance between who you are online and who you are in reality was simply too wide to cross. Zachary's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto mine, wide with a sudden, electric shock of realization. I didn't give him time to process it. I opened the door, stepped out into the bustling hallway, and let the heavy glass doors click shut behind me. The announcement of Rachel's official maternity leave sent a wave of competitive energy through the department. The position of project lead was finally vacant, and the race was on. Normally, the promotion would have been mine by default. My track record was flawless, my seniority was undisputed, and Simon had already indicated his support. But Clara had other plans. I'm putting my name in for the project lead position, Clara announced during our morning team meeting, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she looked around the table. Mr. Harley agreed that it would be a wonderful opportunity for me to show my leadership skills. Of course, I'll still need everyone's help to make sure the transition is smooth. The room was dead silent. Zoe shot me a furious look from across the table, her knuckles white as she gripped her pen. The other team members looked down at their notebooks, refusing to make eye contact. It was a blatant abuse of power. Clara had only been with the company for 6 months, had failed her first major assignment, and was now stepping over everyone else simply because she was sleeping with, or pretending to sleep with, the boss. I remained entirely calm. I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the cool, steady rhythm of my pulse. That's wonderful, Clara, I said, my voice smooth and supportive. The execution phase of the Q4 campaign is highly complex. It requires a deep understanding of our multi-layered supply chain and our proprietary logistics software. I'm sure you're more than prepared to present your strategy to the board next week. Clara's eyes flickered with a brief moment of panic. She hadn't expected me to agree so easily. More importantly, she had no idea what our proprietary logistics software even looked like. Of course, Clara stammered, quickly recovering her smug composure. I've been studying the files. It's really not that difficult if you have the right intellect. Excellent, I smiled. I'll have the preliminary execution modules sent to your drive. Since you're leading the presentation, I'll let you compile the final master slides. As soon as the meeting adjourned, Clara practically sprinted to my cubicle. She slammed her hands onto my desk, her face tight with anxiety despite her heavy makeup. Gwen, you have to write the execution strategy for me, she hissed, her voice low so the others wouldn't hear. I don't know anything about the Q4 supply chain. If I mess this up in front of the regional directors, Zachary, Mr. Harley will be furious. Clara, you're the assistant project lead, I said, pretending to look surprised. And you're applying for the lead position. Surely you don't need me to do your work for you. Don't play games with me, Gwen, Clara whispered, her eyes flashing with malice. I know how this works. You do the writing, I do the presenting. If you help me secure this promotion, I'll make sure you get a massive bonus next quarter. But if you refuse, I'll tell Zachary that you've been sabotaging my work. I'll tell him you're jealous of our relationship and that you're creating a toxic work environment. Who do you think he'll believe? His future wife or a senior desk jockey? His future wife. The sheer delusion of her statement almost made me laugh out loud. Zachary. Harley wouldn't marry a girl who couldn't even explain the difference between projected and closed metrics, no matter how many silver pins she carried. But I needed her to believe she was winning. I needed her to climb as high as possible, so that her eventual fall would be absolute. All right, Clara. I sighed, letting a touch of reluctance color my voice. I'll prepare the strategy and write the presentation notes for you. But you have to deliver it yourself. I won't be in the room to help you if you fumble. Deal. Clara smirked, her anxiety vanishing instantly. She patted my shoulder condescendingly. I knew you were a smart girl, Gwen. Keep this up, and I might actually let you keep your job when I take over the department. She spun on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking victoriously against the hardwood floor. As soon as she was out of sight, Simon walked past my cubicle. He didn't stop, but as he passed, he dropped a small yellow sticky note onto my keyboard. I picked it up. Written in his neat, precise handwriting was a single sentence. The regional board meeting is Friday at 10 a.m. Zachary has requested a full financial audit of the Q4 campaign to be presented alongside the strategy. Do not let her see the audit files. I crumpled the note, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. Simon knew exactly what Clara was doing. And more importantly, Simon was helping me set the trap. The days leading up to the Friday presentation were a whirlwind of quiet, calculated preparation. I worked late every night, but for the first time in 5 years, the overtime didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a countdown. I wrote the strategy presentation for Clara exactly as she wanted, flashy, filled with empty corporate buzzwords, and entirely devoid of any actual substance or accurate data. I used outdated metrics, vague logistical timelines, and overinflated revenue projections that looked beautiful on a color-coded pie chart but would collapse under even the slightest professional scrutiny. Meanwhile, on a separate, highly secure drive, I compiled the actual verified Q4 financial audit. Every line of data was backed by certified receipts, warehouse logistics, reports, and official bank audits. It was a masterpiece of corporate strategy, one that proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Clara's strategy would lose the company nearly $50 million in distribution errors if implemented. On Thursday evening, the office was empty save for the security guards and myself. I was just saving the final files when my phone buzzed on my desk. It was an alert from my personal banking app. Notification. Received $5 from anonymous sender via Venmo. My breath caught in my throat. I opened the app. The sender's profile was completely blank. No name, no photo. Just a single, minimalist letter Z as the username. There was a message attached to the transaction. I'm still drinking from the cheap cat mug. It's the only thing in this office. That doesn't feel like a lie. Please. Just one text. My fingers trembled over the screen. The memory of our virtual relationship flooded my mind. The quiet, late-night conversations when I was too anxious to sleep. The way he would listen to my worries about my heart condition without pitying me. The gentle, steady presence that had become my sanctuary from the brutal realities of my daily life. He was a monster in the boardroom, yes. But to me, in the quiet spaces of the digital world, he had been a home. But then I thought of Clara, sitting in his office, wearing the diamonds he had bought her, carrying my silver pin. I thought of the way he had allowed himself to be deceived simply because he was too lazy or too proud to look past the surface. He had accepted a cheap imitation of me because it was easier than facing the reality of his own actions. I closed the app, transferred the $5 back to his account with a single digit of interest, and added a brief, cold note. Refunded. I don't accept tips from strangers. I packed my bag, turned off my monitor, and walked out into the cool, rain-slicked night. The stage was set. Tomorrow, the storm would break. The executive boardroom on the top floor of the Harley Tower was a masterclass in architectural intimidation. A massive, seamless sheet of black obsidian glass served as the conference table, surrounded by 12 high-backed leather chairs. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling gray expanse of the city. Below, at the head of the table sat Zachary Harley. He looked more formidable than ever, dressed in a bespoke charcoal three-piece suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression entirely devoid of human warmth. To his left sat Simon, his laptop open, his fingers hovering over the keys. Around the table were the regional directors, sharp, older men and women who had spent decades climbing the corporate ladder and had zero tolerance for incompetence. Clara stood at the front of the room, behind the mahogany podium. She was wearing a vibrant red designer dress, her diamonds catching the bright LED lights of the ceiling, her hair styled in perfect, bouncing curls. He looked radiant, confident, and entirely oblivious to the cliff she was about to walk off. I sat in the corner of the room, near the back wall, holding a simple tablet in my lap. Thank you, members of the board, for your time today, Clara began, her voice carrying a practiced, melodic cadence as she clicked to the first slide of the presentation. Today, I am thrilled to present the master execution strategy for our Q4 logistics campaign, a strategy designed to streamline our distribution network and double our regional revenue to a historic target of $1 billion. The directors leaned forward, their expressions analytical. For the first 10 minutes, Clara's presentation went smoothly. She spoke with a high-energy charm, throwing out terms like synergistic distribution, optimized supply chain flow, and dynamic revenue capturing. The slides were beautiful, filled with sweeping animations and bright, encouraging green arrows. But I watched Zachary. His eyes were fixed on the screen, but his brow was furrowed in deep, cold calculation. He wasn't a fool. He had built this empire with his own hands, and he could smell the scent of superficial data from a mile away. Stop! Zachary's voice cut through the room like a sudden crack of thunder. Clara froze, her clicker hovering in midair. Her smile faltered, her eyes darting nervously to Zachary. Yes, Mr. Harley? Is there a specific slide you'd like me to elaborate on? Slide 14, Zachary said, his tone flat and icy. You've projected a 30% reduction in distribution costs by shifting our regional warehousing to the Eastern Corridor. What is the basis for this projection? Oh, Clara laughed quickly, a high-pitched, nervous sound. Well, according to our historical logistical data, the Eastern Corridor has always been a highly efficient hub. By consolidating our resources there, we naturally eliminate redundant shipping routes. Historical data? Zachary leaned forward, his fingers steepled. Our Eastern Corridor warehouse was decommissioned 6 months ago due to severe structural instability and municipal zoning changes. How are you planning to consolidate resources in a facility that currently has no roof? A collective murmur broke out among the regional directors. One of them, an older man with sharp gray eyes, quickly flipped through his printout of the slides, his brow furrowing. Clara's face went entirely white under her heavy foundation. I mean, we are planning to recommission the facility, of course. We've budgeted for the repairs. Where is that budget reflected? Zachary demanded, his voice rising in cold authority. I've reviewed your financial overview. There is no line item for facility rehabilitation. In fact, your projected operational costs are based on active, fully functional facilities. If we implement your strategy today, we will have 80,000 units of inventory sitting on an open asphalt lot in the middle of winter. No, that's a minor typo, Clara stammered, her voice rising in panic. As she looked around the room for support, she looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and furious betrayal. I had my team review these files. Gwen prepared the preliminary logistics data. She was the one who assured me these projections were accurate. Every head in the room turned to look at me. I didn't flinch. I stood up slowly, holding my tablet, and walked to the center of the room. My movements were calm, deliberate, and entirely professional. Mr. Harley, members of the board, I said, my voice clear and steady. As the co-lead for the execution phase, my responsibility was strictly limited to the financial auditing and the real-time risk assessment of the proposed campaign. Assistant project lead Clara Vance insisted on compiling the logistics strategy and the final master slides independently. I tapped my tablet, connecting it to the main boardroom projector. The screen behind Clara split in half. On the left was her flashy, error-ridden presentation. On the right was my comprehensive, real-time financial audit. This is the actual verified Q4 audit, I explained, pointing to the cold, hard data on the right. If we proceed with the Eastern Corridor consolidation as Clara proposed, the company will face a distribution deficit of $48 million within the first 30 days. Additionally, her revenue projections are based on last year's closed metrics, completely ignoring the current 15% spike in fuel tariffs and regional transit taxes. The directors gasped. The gray-eyed man stood up, looking at the screen in disbelief. This is a disaster. If we had approved this strategy, we would have faced a catastrophic supply chain collapse before the holidays. Gwen, Clara shrieked, her professional facade completely shattering. She pointed a trembling, diamond-encrusted finger at me. You did this on purpose. You sabotaged me. You gave me those files. You're just jealous because I'm dating Zachary. You wanted to ruin my career. Clara, be quiet, Simon said, his voice flat but carrying an absolute authority, as he stood up from his chair. No, I won't be quiet. Clara screamed, tears of rage spilling over her eyelashes, ruining her dark red lipstick. She ran to Zachary's side of the table, grabbing his arm. Zachary, darling, please. You have to believe me. She's a liar. She's trying to destroy us. Tell them to fire her. Tell them she's the one who made the mistake. Zachary didn't look at her. He slowly reached down, peeled her fingers off his expensive wool sleeve, and stood up. He was tall, imposing, and his aura was so cold that even the regional directors took a step back. Clara, Zachary said, his voice quiet, almost gentle, but vibrating with a terrifying, underlying rage. Do you remember the silver fountain pen you carried into my office 2 weeks ago? Clara blinked, her sobbing pausing for a fraction of a second. The pen? Yes, of course. You told me to leave it on your desk. Where did you get it? I told you. It was a gift. A gift from someone special who loves me. Zachary reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and turned it toward her. Displayed on the screen was a highly detailed, official receipt of purchase from a custom jewelry boutique in Munich, Germany. There are only 3 of these pens in existence, Zachary said, his voice echoing in the silent room. They were custom ordered by my personal estate, engraved with a unique, microscopic serial number registered to my private account. I sent one of those pens to a very specific address 3 weeks ago, an address that does not belong to you. Clara's jaw dropped. Her body began to tremble violently. Zachary, I can explain. The person I sent that pen to, Zachary continued, his eyes slowly turning away from Clara and locking onto me, his gaze intense, burning, and filled with a sudden, overwhelming emotion, is a highly intelligent, sharp-witted woman who has spent the last 3 years challenging my perspective, keeping me grounded, and saving my sanity. She is a woman who would never, under any circumstances, present a garbage strategy like the one you just delivered. He took a step closer to me, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that ignored the presence of everyone else in the room. She is a woman who once sent me a photo of a cheap, poorly glazed ceramic cat mug and told me it had character. The boardroom went dead silent. Clara looked from Zachary to me, her eyes wide with a sudden horrific understanding. No, that's impossible. Gwen, you're the one? But you said you didn't know him. You said you broke up because of bad feng shui. I did, I said flatly, looking directly at Zachary. And I was right, because dating a man who uses his corporate power to cut his employees' salaries and force entire departments into overtime just because he's having a personal disagreement is indeed very bad feng shui. Zachary flinched. The cold, unfeeling CEO of the Harley Empire looked as if he had been struck across the face. Gwen, he whispered, his voice cracking with a vulnerability that shocked the regional directors. I didn't know. If I had known it was you, if you had known it was me, you wouldn't have treated me like a machine? I asked, my voice rising in quiet indignation. But you would have continued to treat everyone else that way? You would have let Clara take the credit for my work. You would have let your department suffer under your temper. I shook my head, my face flat and unyielding. A real relationship isn't a sanctuary from your real life, Zachary. It's a reflection of who you are when no one is watching. And who you are is a tyrant. I turned to the regional directors, bowing my head slightly. Members of the board, my complete financial audit and risk assessment files have been uploaded to the shared drive. I believe my 5 years of service and the accuracy of this data speak for themselves regarding the vacancy for the project lead position. However, regardless of your decision, I am officially submitting my resignation today. Gwen, no. Zachary took a desperate step forward, reaching out a hand, but Simon stepped between them, giving Zachary a firm, warning look. I actually value my life, I said, a faint, peaceful smile touching my lips as I felt the steady, calm rhythm of my heart. And my heart condition doesn't do well with high-stress situations. Goodbye, Mr. Harley. I turned on my heel, walked out of the boardroom, and let the heavy double doors click shut behind me. 3 months later, the autumn air was crisp, carrying the sweet, smoky scent of fallen leaves. I sat at a small, outdoor wooden table of a quiet, independent coffee shop on the corner of the University District. I took a slow sip of my flat white, feeling the warm, comforting heat of the ceramic cup against my fingers. It was a cheap, poorly glazed cup with a tiny misshapen cat painted on the side. Here is your blueberry scone, Ms. Vance, a polite voice said. I looked up to see Simon, dressed not in his stiff corporate suit, but in a comfortable, casual sweater. He smiled, setting the plate down, and sat in the chair opposite me. After the boardroom disaster, the regional board had immediately launched an internal investigation. Clara Vance was fired on the spot and faced civil charges for corporate fraud and plagiarism. But more importantly, the board had refused to accept my resignation. Instead, they had offered me a promotion to Regional Director of Logistics with a contract that allowed me to work remotely from my own office, completely independent of the branch office and Zachary's direct supervision. I had accepted. How is the new department running? I asked, smiling. Incredibly well, Simon replied, taking a sip of his own coffee. The new overtime policies you implemented have boosted productivity by 40%. The team actually smiles when they come to work now. And Zachary? I asked, my voice softening slightly. Simon's expression turned pensive. He's changed, Gwen. Completely. After you left, he stepped down as the active CEO of our branch and returned to the parent company. But before he left, he personally restored the salary cuts, issued a formal apology to the entire department, and established a corporate wellness fund in your name. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet-lined box, sliding it across the table toward me. He asked me to give you this. He said he won't contact you and he won't bother you again. But he wanted you to have it. I opened the box. Resting on the black velvet was the silver fountain pen. But the original, cold, metallic cap had been replaced. In its place was a beautiful, custom-molded ceramic cap, painted with a tiny, misshapen cat. There was a small, handwritten note inside the lid of the box. I'm learning to be a better man. On my own terms, in the real world. Thank you for showing me the difference between a symbol and a home. Live well, Gwen. I ran my thumb over the smooth, ceramic cap, a quiet, gentle warmth spreading through my chest. My heart was steady, beating with a healthy, uninterrupted rhythm. I closed the box, slipped it into my bag, and took another sip of my coffee. The storm had passed, the air was clear, and for the first time in my life, the future was entirely mine to write.